Welcome to Release Date Rewind, a podcast that celebrates movie and TV anniversaries. I'm Mark J. Parker, a movie lover and maker, and in this episode, we're continuing the theme of the month, which is romance. But we're adding comedy to the mix this time. We are going back to the 80s with the popular February rom-com, The Wedding Singer, for its 25th anniversary this month. Whoopadeedoo! That's right, we're coasting through early 1998 with another movie we love. We reveal lots of things on this show, so be warned. And if you haven't seen it or would like to watch it again, it's available to stream in the US on HBO Max. All right, material girls and boys, pause the wedding plans because it's time to rewind. Okay, everybody, I am super excited to have a friend and a fellow filmmaker on this show. I haven't talked to this guy in a while. We've seen each other on Instagram and Facebook, always liking and keeping tabs that way, but we haven't actually caught up in a long time, pre-COVID, pre-lots of stuff. Everybody, please welcome Amos Posner. Hello, my friend Amos. How's it going?
It's going great. Hey, Mark.
Okay, we were just talking about you're in New York, I'm now in Maine, you're in Manhattan. I forget. How, Amos, let's do a quick trip down memory lane. We know each other. I know we've known each other for a long time. We met through, was it through Cece Webster and Aaron Moore, Dan Lane, like that whole group, I think? Is that how we met?
That's right. And I was just listening to you talk to Cece about
Yep.
Tootsie, which was, of course, wonderful. And
Yep. Isn't she
I
great?
don't know how I don't know how to not be a little intimidated by how wise Cece is, but it was so great to hear you two talk about Tootsie.
It's so funny. A lot of people say that whether they know Cece or not from listening to this show and just knowing her, any other friends, and they're like, wow, she's really smart. I'm like, yeah, she is. Like, she needs to do her own podcast. I know very little compared to her, so I'm so glad you checked that out. She is a whiz, a movie whiz, screenwriting whiz. So, yeah, because I think I saw your film B-side. I want to say it was with Cece. Maybe was it part of the drive-in film festival that she was doing, or am I
It
totally
was.
wrong? It was. Okay. Yes. Okay. Luckily, I feel like I'm forgetting things as I get older and trying to piece things together. I'm like, was it? Okay. So I'm right. I'm right on that aspect. And that was already what, maybe 10 years ago-ish? What do you think?
Thereabouts. Thereabouts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your films. I've seen B-side. I know you have made some others. What kind of films do you make? There are these great indie features, some rom-com elements, right? Definitely some romance in there, which we'll talk more about soon. But tell me about your films.
So my first feature was B-Side starring Ryan Eggold,
Yeah.
who you might know from New Amsterdam or many other things.
Yep.
And I later directed a small indie feature called After Party that was written and produced by Jesse Knight. So I didn't write that one.
Yeah.
In my heart, I love rom-coms. I love coming of age movies,
I love it. Yeah.
and that's part of where my love of The Wedding Singer comes in. And yeah, my next work in progress is a New York-based rom-com
Nice.
of sorts. Yeah.
Ooh, I like that. Do we have a title yet? Can you tell us, or is it all super confidential, top secret?
Well, I can tell you about it. It won't make sense out of context, but the
Ooh.
title right now is The Back, BAC,
Oh.
which relates to a bar that features prominently in the script,
Oh,
uh,
nice.
which has a malfunctioning sign. So it's supposed to be called the Baccalaureate, but only the first three letters light up.
Love it. Oh, that's so fun. And is this one you wrote as well?
Wrote this one solo, which
Nice.
is a departure for me and an exciting one.
Yeah, because now with B-side, you wrote and directed that, but you co-wrote that one?
I co-wrote that one with my dear friend Joe Uchel.
Okay, cool. So what was it like? I mean, I've written a good amount of shorts. It's funny we're talking about features and writing a feature and writing it solo because I'm starting to try to write a feature solo, which I haven't done in over 10 years. And oh my God, it's tough, Amos. How do you do it? How do you write by yourself a whole feature film?
With great difficulty is the answer.
Yeah.
And a lot of neurosis. I feel like you have to be more neurotic to write alone. All the back and forth, all the disagreements, they're all between you and you. I will say it does help that I'm engaged to a writer and editor and living
Oh,
with someone who can be a sounding board and has insights into writing, and
Brilliant.
and also who knows my writing really well,
That's
uh,
good.
is very helpful check and balance when it comes to the fight between me and me.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, wow, I love that. The fight between me and me. That's another title. Keep that in mind for something in the future. No, that's great. That is so amazing that your fiance can also, yeah, be that extra set of eyes. She knows, like you were telling me offline, the book world and all that. So, wow. Now, how did you two meet? And tell us, you just told me some very exciting, perfect rom-com news. What's happening in 4 weeks in your life?
4 weeks from today, we're getting married.
I love it. I love it so much. I love weddings. In a past life, while I was working in film and TV a lot, I was still being a cater waiter. So that's also why I kind of love The Wedding Singer. And I hated being a cater waiter. I mean, it's better than a regular waiter because you don't really have to take orders. It's just like, is it the chicken or the beef kind of thing? But I loved working weddings. So where is your wedding happening? How has planning been? I love all those details. How's it been going?
It's mostly been going pretty well. The funny thing for me is that I feel like traditionally I'm supposed to have cold feet,
Mm,
and I don't have cold feet about getting married or the person I'm marrying, even a little bit.
good.
On the other hand, I have absolutely freezing feet when it comes to having an event.
Oh, yep, I know. All the little details and the spotlights on you and yeah, I love that freezing feet. Where is it going to be in the city?
Yes, we're
Nice.
actually getting married in a movie theater.
Amos, oh my God, that is so perfect. Perfect for you, perfect for life. What now? Which theater? We won't. This isn't a very popular podcast. Don't worry, no one's going to stalk you. But which theater are you going to do it in?
So we're actually married in at the Museum of the Moving Image.
Oh, I love that place. What a great idea. And so, will you be able to have kind of like your whole reception there as well, or you'll do that elsewhere?
No, the reception will be at the museum, so the ceremony will be in the theater, but then people will be able to walk around to the exhibits.
Oh my God, Amos. A filmmaker's wedding. I love it so much. I'm so happy for you. Now, how long have you guys been together?
We've been together a long time at this point. We've been together over 7 years. Uh,
Wow. Oh,
uh,
congratulations. 4 weeks. So that's like a nice mid-March-ish, no, late March kind of springtime wedding.
Late
Yeah.
March, yeah.
Love it. Oh, I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to see pics. The Museum of the Moving Image. If anyone out there listening hasn't been there, it's in Queens, a beautiful, really cool museum with amazing exhibits, right? I mean, I haven't been there in a long time, but I've been a few times and it's really cool stuff for sure. Wow. Well, what a perfect segue into our discussion on rom-coms. Now, Amos, if anyone follows me on Facebook and stuff, I had posted my kind of idea list for some upcoming episodes, and I was excited to see Amos comment and say, "Hey, I love The Wedding Singer." I was like, "Ooh, that could be interesting because I know you've done some rom-com stuff in the past." And by the way, your film The After Party, I haven't seen that one yet. I have to see it, but I know it co-stars someone I know that I've booked in things, Sean Clier, right?
I love Sean
I
Clier.
love Sean Clier. I'm so happy that he's doing more and more and more, and he's such a great guy, right?
He's such a great guy. When we shot After Party, there was a night when uh, we were kind of changing our schedules from shooting day for night to, night shoots.
Yep.
And so the whole cast and crew, we're all staying up as late as we can. We're all
Mm.
staying in a Super 8 motel in the Hudson Valley. And one of the things that's happening is one of the producers has a poker game going. And Sean apparently won this poker game. And he responded to this by going to the old-fashioned bakery in town and the next day bringing fancy cakes for the whole crew.
Oh my gosh, what a gem. That is so nice. Yeah,
Sean,
not only a great actor, right, but just a really cool guy to work with, for sure.
absolute sweetheart to work with. I'd work with
Wow.
Sean again in a heartbeat. Love that
Oh,
guy.
love it.
And he was really funny in the rom-com Wedding Season. I don't
Oh
know if
yes, I
you
haven't seen that
caught
one yet.
that one.
Right, on Netflix, right? I think that's Netflix.
Yeah, it's an Indian rom-com, and he's the
Yes.
kind of comic relief white guy who
Oh,
is
that's so funny.
trying to be down with the culture he's marrying into, and he's great at it.
Oh, love it. Yeah, I had worked with him a long time ago now. Gosh, 20, oh my gosh, wow, it might be almost 10 years. 2014, I think it was, a rom-com called Sam. Um, Written and directed by Nicholas Brooks, son of Mel Brooks. So that's where I met him, and then I booked him on a couple other things at ABC that I was working on. But yeah, I love that he's found a nice little spot in some rom-com territory, but then he does other things. So yeah, just had to shout out that little connection we have with Sean Clier being in some good stuff. But okay, so Amos, you had told me when you saw The Wedding Singer, you're like, oh my God, I love The Wedding Singer. I love rom-coms. Tell me just well, before we get into the details of The Wedding Singer, tell me, why do you love rom-coms? What are some of your other favorite rom-coms? Because I love hearing, especially from a straight man, a man at all, it's nice to hear that you love this genre. So tell me why.
Well, I think part of it is that I'm an old millennial. And so when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, you throw on, and this is, before streaming, and I lived in a very basic cable world. And so you turn on TBS on the weekend, and there would be When Harry Met Sally. There would be Sleepless in Seattle. There would be, and so I kind of grew up in this time when there was Nora Ephron, there was Nancy Myers,
Hmm.
and even beyond that, I think my favorite movie is LA Story with Steve Martin. And my mom was into a lot of these movies, and so they would kind of ambiently be on,
Yeah.
but they were also really good. And I've always gravitated toward movies that are just about people and that are funny, and I'm a sentimental guy, and
Yeah.
I don't know what's better than Moonstruck, do you?
Oh
And
gosh, that's a
I
good
don't,
question, right? Oh my God. That's a pretty iconic one.
but I never get tired of that. I never get tired of When Harry Met Sally. And then as uh I went off to college and I found myself studying film. And as I got into old movies, I found even more that I loved rom-coms.
Yeah.
And I love Lubitsch. I love Billy Wilder. Just the other night, I was watching Bluebeard's Eighth Wife.
Oh, I haven't
Uh,
seen that one.
oh, it's a hilarious Lubitsch rom-com with Gary Cooper and Claudette Colbert.
Oh, nice. Okay, classic. What year was that? Do you remember?
I do not off the top of my head. I want to say
Yeah.
38, but I might be totally wrong.
Yeah, back in the day. Wow. Okay,
And
good.
that
Some
one's a little more acidic than something like It Happened One Night.
I like the word acidic with a certain kind of rom-com, because you're so right. It's a word that could describe some rom-coms with a little bit of like an edge, a bite, right? I like that. And I totally agree with you. I'm a basic cable guy as well. When it's on, when something is on that's classic, whether you've seen it or not, it's just so nice to have that on. And I love that your mom also was kind of watching this stuff with you. So kind of via her, you've started to kind of fall in love with this stuff. So that is so nice. I love it. Cool. Well, let's talk about The Wedding Singer. Let's rewind, Amos. Let's go back 25 years. Crazy, because I saw this movie in the theater. Did you see it in the theater? Do you remember?
I most certainly did.
Right? Wow. It's crazy to think, because, I mean, it's also just really interesting, and maybe you agree. And I've talked about this before on the show that, like, the mid to late 90s, it's crazy because, like, I guess there was just like a boom in film technology, because these movies still, in my opinion, look good. Whereas some early 90s and of course 80s movies, it's grainy, it's not so crisp and clear, you know? So it's crazy when I rewatch it that I'm like, wow, I was 10 when I saw this in the theater. Holy cow, because it doesn't feel that old to me.
Yeah, and I feel like especially with we were kind of in the wilderness with digital video for a
Oh, totally.
while,
Hmm.
and then now so often if you see a rom-com in particular, it'll be something where, they didn't put much money into it because it's just going to go into the all you can eat buffet of streaming. So
Totally.
it's not something that's meant to have like a theatrical quality to it. And so we've entered this funny time when you watch something that in the 90s would have been a throwaway, but now it feels like, oh, this is production values. This is
Yeah.
beautiful. This is like a prestige piece.
You're so right. Isn't that funny? What used to be bad is now we look back and we're actually very fond of it, and it looks better or it looks more real, right? That's so interesting. Yeah, screw the reviews, screw the haters, right? And speaking of streaming and how rom-coms kind of are no longer in theaters. I mean, a lot of stuff isn't in theaters anymore. And I'm partially to blame. I do love watching stuff at home. I have to be honest. Every now and then, yeah, but right. But Amos, what do you think as a feature filmmaker? Do you wish rom-coms still held attention in theaters, or are you okay with them kind of taking over streaming? What do you think?
Well, personally, I'd love it if they were in theaters more because what's better than watching a comedy with an audience?
Yeah, totally. Especially
And
one like this, right? With the big laughs and gasps. Yeah, I hear you.
absolutely, and don't get me wrong, I also love cozying up on the couch and throwing on a rom-com at home, and you
Yeah,
know, it's you don't have to be sneaky about opening a bottle of wine with it at home. But
totally. Yep.
but isn't it also great when you're walking out of a crowded theater and you've laughed together with these people and everyone's walking out in a slightly better mood than they walked in? And part of why I don't think that the theatrical experience should only be the domain of these giant movies.
Yeah. And you are so right. There was it's such a nostalgic feeling for us now at our age and now in today's world, leaving a theater with a big crowd and immediately talking about it with whoever you're with, like feeling that like glow of like, wow, yeah, that was really good or bad, whatever. And like going out into the world again and your eyes hurt and it's like, whoa, okay, where are we? You know? Yeah, wow, that really brought me back.
Before the internet, before cell phones, before rollerblades, there was a time
Everybody on the dance floor. Very nice, Grandma Molly.
when Robbie Hart was the most popular wedding singer around.
You spin me right round, baby, right round. Like a record, baby, right round, round, round. Hey, somebody get some pants on that kid.
We're going back to February 13th, 1998, Valentine's Day weekend. I saw that this was also an Olympics, Winter Olympics was going on at this time as well this weekend. So, on the TV side, another romance kind of adjacent thing, and I want to ask if you saw it. Dawson's Creek had just started a couple weeks prior, about a little less than a month earlier, which I just talked about on this show. Did you watch that show, Amos, or were you too cool for Dawson?
Well, I don't think anyone who knew me in the 90s would accuse me of being too cool for anything, but for other reasons, I never really watched Dawson's Creek.
Okay, cool. You know, if you ever have time, check it out. At least season one, it's a great rewatch or first time watch. There's some really good stuff in there. It's a little sappy, but that's part of the fun. Popular movies besides The Wedding Singer at this time, Titanic, of course, was still number one and would continue being number one for a while. That had opened in December. This film came out the same day as Sphere. Do you remember Sphere with Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, sci-fi thriller? I saw that one in theaters too.
So I don't think I've ever actually seen the movie of that
Ooh.
because I loved the book.
Oh yeah.
Before I actualized into a rom-com person, I had a I had my tween years as a sci-fi kid,
Oh,
and
love
I loved
it.
Michael Crichton.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say, was that a Michael Crichton book? I'm pretty, yeah, I figured it was. Yeah, I didn't read the book, but the movie isn't good, but I had a fun time with it. I remember being a little freaked out. I think Queen Latifah and Liev Schreiber were in it. I love that. Ooh, well, maybe one day you'll merge worlds. You'll make a film that is a sci-fi rom-com. We haven't really gotten much of that. So think about that, Amos. You can take that idea. So besides Sphere, a few other popular movies that had come out around this time. Great Expectations, the version with Gwyneth and Ethan Hawke, I believe, that was popular. As was The Blues Brothers 2000. That film kind of made a quick splash around the same time. So we had a mix of, you know, the holdovers from December, Good Will Hunting, As Good as It Gets. Those awards films were still super popular. But then these more fun, simpler, less awards fair. We're doing some good things as well. So before I break down who's who in the creators and the cast and talk about where they were in their careers, Amos, I'm going to throw it over to you in your own words. What is The Wedding Singer about?
So The Wedding Singer, I would describe it two different ways. On a plot level, it's a great high concept rom-com. It's about a wedding singer who gets left at the altar and then in his recovery from that broken heart falls in love with an engaged woman.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
But it's also Adam Sandler making fun of the 80s.
Totally. You are so right. Yeah, it really is both. There's an actual story there, and then there's so much uh commentary on the 80s, whether it's visual, there's dialogue about it. Yes, you're right.
In some ways, this movie Trojan horsed a lot of people like me into a rom-com because I was a teenage Jewish boy from New York, so it's impossible to overstate what Adam Sandler meant to people like me.
Yeah.
At the time, he was our comic. you know?
Yeah, I believe it.
And
Yeah.
and we had Madison and when we were in middle school and Happy Gilmore, and the Hanukkah song had come out 2 years earlier. I mean, 2 years to the day before The Wedding Singer came out was
Wow.
Adam Sandler's comedy album, What the Hell Happened to Me? And that was the one that had the goat on it. It had the Hanukkah song on it. And so then 2 years later, we see all the commercials, and the whole shtick of this is it's an Adam Sandler movie about making fun of the 80s.
Yeah,
Sign me up. Sounds great. It just happened to also be a really good rom-com.
totally. You are so right. That's a really great way to put it. This Trojan horsed you into rom-coms. And I feel like it Trojan horsed me into loving, because I can't remember. I knew growing up, my family loved like disco. So like on the way to the Jersey Shore, we would listen to ABBA and maybe some 80s. But I honestly feel like rewatching this film, I think I fell in love with 80s music maybe because of this film. Like, I mean, it opens with "You Spin Me Right Round," and like I know it's cheesy, but I do love that song. And as a kid, I was obsessed with that song. And I think it's because of this movie. So yes, I love that this was a vehicle that opened, that maybe we went to it for a certain reason, but then you got more out of it and embraced another thing that you didn't really think too much about previously. I love that. Yeah, I didn't know that his comedy album was only 2 years prior. That's amazing. I know he left SNL, I think in 95, same year as Billy Madison. So that was really his breakout year in Happy Gilmore. It sounds like you were obsessed with Billy and Happy. Yeah?
Oh, yeah. And I went to a Jewish school through 8th grade.
Okay.
And so to have this comedian who, the Hanukkah song, now I hear it and I'm like, so the bit is it's a list of Jewish people. Like, okay,
Yeah.
but to, 13-year-old me, this was great. And also, people love to talk about how many Jewish people there are in entertainment,
Yeah.
but it's not like they've always been able to actually show that they're Jewish in any way or talk about it or even keep their names. And
Mm,
then suddenly we have Adam Sandler, and even in The Wedding Singer, he's singing in Hebrew at a bar mitzvah. We didn't
yeah.
have that all the time.
Your
And
young mind must have been like blown at that moment. Like, whoa, this is like Jewish entertainment on top of Jewish entertainment or something, right? In that bar mitzvah scene. That's funny.
I loved Billy Madison. I loved
Yeah.
Happy Gilmore. I had the sense of humor of a 12-year-old when I was 12, and let me tell you, Billy Madison was great for that.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Iconic. Like, I think we luckily, and maybe I'm sure even if we were older, we would get a kick out of it. But at that like middle school age, for those big movies to come out, I mean, it was all anyone talked about, right? And then The Wedding Singer just continued that. He had a really solid start to his post SNL film career. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, so that's kind of like what was going on at the time to set the scene. Now I'll quickly talk more since we're talking about Adam's career and all that. So, and I'm sure, and chime in, Amos. I'm sure you probably saw some of this too, if you were, researching or finding any fun facts. So, Adam had this idea for a comedy about a wedding singer who gets left at the altar, and he had suggested it to his frequent writing partner, Tim Herlihy, I believe is his last name. He had co-written with Adam, of course, Billy and Happy Gilmore. And also, did you see that some ghostwriters, some uncredited writers, in addition to Adam Sandler on the script, were Carrie Fisher and Judd Apatow, icons. What do you make of that?
I had no idea about Carrie Fisher, and I think that's so great.
It's
Uh,
amazing.
It also makes so much sense because to me, the biggest difference between The Wedding Singer and Happy Gilmore or Billy Madison is because both of those have a love interest, a love storyline,
Yep.
a blonde woman that can kind of define whether he lives happily ever after or not.
Right.
But with all due respect to Bridget Wilson and Julie Bowen, they're kind of throwaways.
Yeah.
They're not the point. And in this case, oh, it's so much more about her. And some of that is the gravitational pull of Drew Barrymore,
Right.
but also just her perspective is given a lot more. And in reading up, apparently that's a lot of who better to sympathetically write a role for, you know, the traumatized daughter of Hollywood royalty, then Carrie Fisher.
You're so right. Wow, I didn't think about that connection. Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. They can speak on so many levels together. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, Carrie had it's funny. We didn't know at the time. We were young. But even until recently, I didn't realize that, she, was a script doctor on some iconic stuff. Even last year I talked about Sister Act. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's really impressive and really a shame that she didn't get any credit on these films, but as the Writers Guild and all, all very detailed stuff, and there are rules and all that. But yeah, Carrie helped enhance the Julia Sullivan character, that female perspective that, you're so right, was missing from the previous films. So much so, I was trying to remember before you said Julie Bowen's name. I was like, yeah, who was the blonde in Happy Gilmore? I barely remember her. And you're right, it was Julie Bowen. I remember Bridget Wilson very well, just because, man, what a babe. And like, I just remember her. I think I had seen Billy Madison more than Happy Gilmore, so I just knew that. But yeah, so in comes Drew's character, and now we have someone to really co-headline with Sandler, right? Like now he's met his match, it feels like, in this third film that he had done post SNL, And I also thought it was interesting, Tim Herlihy had co-written those previous films with Sandler, but this was his first one writing solo. And for the most part, I think it's an awesome script. And not only is it hilarious, but like there's some great tension. We'll get into it soon, but like, oh my God, some great heartbreaking rom-com stuff that you're shouting at the screen, no, So this kind of proved that he could do it. And it's funny, I saw that Sandler, Herlihy, and this same director, Frank Karachi, all worked on The Waterboy. Karachi, right? They all worked on The Waterboy later in 1998. I forgot 98 was like a two-header for all of them with The Waterboy, a movie I don't love as much as this, but I totally respect, people enjoying that one. I didn't care so much about that one, right?
Until he got stood up at his own wedding.
I woke up this morning and I realized I'm about to marry a wedding singer.
Speaking of Frank Karachi, he had previously only directed one feature film. So pretty cool that he was able to then get this massive thing. A smaller thriller he did called Murdered Innocence. And he, I guess, was friends with Sandler from NYU. So that's how they knew each other. And another frequent Adam Sandler collaborator. He had gone on to do Click. And I think he worked with Sandler and Barrymore on Blended, their third film, in their rom-com legacy. So cool how they all kind of like, kept it going. Now, let's talk about Drew Barrymore real quick. She, of course, had just previously done a little over a year before Scream, which we all know was huge for her. Totally like kind of resurrected her kind of odd, interesting career in the early to mid 90s, right? So she did that, and she was also doing smaller films, some rom-coms, Best Men and Wishful Thinking. And she had approached Sandler to work together on a film, saying they were, and you probably saw this too, cinematic soulmates, she said, even before they really knew each other, really had worked together. And she also had a relationship with the director. So I love, how things are all kind of put into place. It wasn't like there was obviously no need for auditions. It was just sort of mutual friends getting together and, casting these leads. And they are, it makes sense that the two of them have made movies that have made so many millions between this, 50 First Dates, and Blended. I actually haven't seen Blended. Did you see that one? Like 10
Neither
years?
have I.
Yeah.
No.
That one looked, how do I say it nicely? That one just looked a little less than, 50 First Dates was their biggest hit. That made like 200 million worldwide. I definitely saw that one in theaters. But by the time Blended came out, it was kind of like, been there, done that for me, But it still made a ton of money. It made over 100 million, much like this film. So I mean, rewatching this, you remember just their chemistry and the fun they have. It is palpable. Like I was smiling, even though I've seen this film a bunch of times. I was smiling as if I saw it for the first time.
I mean, it's a delight.
It's
an absolute delight. And so many of the things that they reined in as well, because it's funny that The Waterboy was after this, and the same director too, because in rewatching The Wedding Singer, part of what stands out to me is that Adam Sandler doesn't have that barely under the surface kind of rage. In Billy Madison, he's kind of always ready to go off the handle.
Yep.
And in Happy Gilmore, he punches Bob Barker. Like, he's always the whole point of that character is that he's a rage monster.
Right.
And same with the Water Boy. It's all about channeling his rage. But in this movie, they don't do that.
Yeah.
In this movie, there's the famous line where he says to Linda, the woman who left him at the altar, oh God, I'm losing the exact phrase now.
Is this the iconic, when he's down in the dumps, of course, he's softer, and he says, again, things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday. That line, are you thinking?
Mark.
Okay.
Yes, that is the exact line.
I do love that line so much, but you are really right. Yeah. He doesn't
shout that until the second time.
The second time, yes. You're right. You bring up a good point. A lot of his comedy is funny because he's about to just blow up. In this film, he does blow up like that time, a few other times, but only because there's a very clear reason for it. Normally, he's not a guy that just blows up at all. He's very mild and a normal, nice guy. Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe that's also why I like this one so much, because it showed us another side to Sandler that is quite, I don't want to say soft, because, that word can sometimes be negative, so I'm not going to say that, but just a more gentle, nice guy who you really, really root for.
Yeah, and also that allows you to root for him to be with Drew Barrymore, because I have a theory with Drew Barrymore. And
Tell me.
especially watching this movie, I think that Drew Barrymore's face, in part because it's so round, I think she triggers an evolutionary response in the viewer, where I don't know about you, but I see Drew Barrymore and I just want to protect her at all costs.
Absolutely.
It's the same response you get to like a baby or a puppy. Protect Drew Barrymore. A different Adam Sandler, a ragey Adam Sandler, keep him away from her.
Yeah, you're so right. Absolutely, Amos. Yeah.
Adam Sandler.
In any film, you're right. You wanna help her, even when she's badass in Charlie's Angels or something else, or Poison Ivy, early 90s. You still feel for her. You want her to do good. You want her to help. You get help. So that's, I think, why it was genius casting that she was, in that opening scene in Scream. It's like, no, our angel, she can't go, right? Yeah. So maybe having her, not only a good character in Julia Sullivan, but having her, Drew Barrymore, now that's gonna not only up Adam Sandler's game, but yeah, tweak that rage.
Once again, things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday!
New Line Cinema presents.
Is it true that you're in the middle of a nervous breakdown?
Whoopadeedoo!
I know you saw this in the theater. Do you remember, did you go opening weekend?
I don't remember if I went opening weekend.
Do you remember who you went with?
I think I went with my brother.
Nice.
Because he's the one who got me, I'm a youngest child, and my brother got me into Adam Sandler. He got me into so many of the comedians that I was into, and we turned out to both like romantic comedies. And again, I think this helped get us there. But
I love that. Yeah.
Part of what was funny about seeing this movie in the context of the 90s is that in making fun of the 80s, it felt like, to go back to the subject of basic cable, I feel like in those days, if you turned on VH1 or even MTV, there was so much programming that was just designed to be about, hey, remember how weird the 80s were?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like the degree to which, even if you did not remember the 80s even at all, which I mean, I don't really, you still had to know about the Flock of Seagulls haircut. We were closing in on Y2K and we were still making fun of the Flock of Seagulls haircut. It was on Friends. They were talking about it on VH1 all the time. We had to know about Kajagoogoo and all these. But at the same time, you talk about the music and how good the music is in this. And I feel like between the music and everything else, the movie has some of the energy of a really good karaoke night or a really good costume party, where we're making fun of all this stuff, but also we sure do enjoy it.
Yes, that's a really excellent point. Amos, you are throwing out these great thoughts here.
Adam Sandler.
Hey, psycho. Get out of my Van Halen t-shirt before you jinx the band and they break up.
And Drew Barrymore.
You're the wedding singer.
How you doing? I'm Robbie.
I'm Julia.
In a story about finding love where you least expect it.
Uh-oh. What? You like her?
No, I don't.
And speaking of costumes, Mona May, the great Mona May, who had done Clueless and Romy and Michelle, and she was on this show. I interviewed her last year around the time Romy and Michelle turned 25. I mean, she did these costumes, and they're perfect in a way where they're not too costumey. Like, at times, Robbie Hart, Adam Sandler, looks just like a normal guy with bad hair, nothing really that flashy or fancy, right? But then when they're going out, and his friend Sammy's got that red Michael Jackson coat, or Holly, played by the great Christine Taylor, is like a Madonna wannabe, right? Like, there's so many great little details and, you know, so funny it's ugly kind of stuff from the 80s, lovingly sending it up, you know, and it has that karaoke vibe that you mentioned. Totally.
There's a Boy George impersonator
Yes.
in the band who, I don't know if you came across this too, but apparently Boy George, like the real Boy George, loved it. Loved the wedding singer, loved the representation. Yeah.
Oh, I love that, because you never know, especially with someone like Boy George.
Hilarious.
You know, yeah, you never know if he's gonna. Maybe he takes himself too seriously, not, you know. But I love Alexis Arquette is so much fun in this movie, and you know it's sad because, well, obviously she had passed away a few years ago. But you know, one thing I don't love about the movie, and I know it was still the 1998, and of course it's set in the 80s, so neither were good times to be friendly to queer people. But I do wish that Tim Herlihy or Frank Coraci or Sandler, anyone, I do wish they were a little bit nicer to people like George, because to me what was funny was George was just a weirdo, like taking themselves too seriously, right? And like loving Boy George to the point where, you know, he looks just like him. And it's hard rewatching it and seeing, you know, the wedding patrons, you know, being like, ugh, scary, freaky, gross, you know. The film's slightly a little homophobic, queerphobic, I think, you know, but like I said, so was a lot of things were in 1998. So you can't really, and especially in the 80s. So you can't really get around it. I just kind of wish in a perfect world, they sort of just embrace George more, which apparently I haven't seen the musical version of this film, but we know this spawned the Wedding Singer, the stage musical, which is still going on all over the world, you know, different community theaters and everything. And I think George has more of a role in that. I think George gets to sing some songs and be a bit more of like a sidekick, which feels right to me. You know, I think that's fun.
Although I will also say, I think that in addition to making fun of the 80s, it's an important detail to this movie that it is also taking on what is generally considered to be fair game, which is New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
and so
Ridgefield.
now I should take a moment here to point out that I am marrying a New Jersey native who is, as we have this conversation, in New Jersey. I have no bad feelings toward New Jersey.
Thank you. I'm from New Jersey, so I appreciate it. Okay. Not all Jersey is bad. Where is she from in Jersey? Do you know the town?
Lambertville. You can walk over the river right into New Hope.
Oh, oh my God,
she's
yeah.
from Hunterdon County.
I love that area. New Hope is amazing. I'm not all that far from there where I grew up in Morristown near Cherry Hill. So, okay, good. She's like a central South Jersey girl. Oh, I'm a fan. This could be a great marriage. But I'm glad you're not, you know, hating on us too much. But yes, this movie, because I wasn't sure at first rewatching it. I couldn't remember where it takes place. And then, you know, Glenn Gulia, our villain, I hate him. He works in Wall Street. You know, they talk about going into the city. So I couldn't remember if this was Connecticut, Jersey, maybe just elsewhere in New York. But yes, you're right. It's good old New Jersey.
This is my fiance, Glenn.
I don't even know your last name.
It's Gulia.
Julia's last name is gonna be Gulia. Julia Gulia. That's funny.
Why is that funny?
I don't know.
And so I feel like when it comes to George not getting the warmest reception from audiences, I feel like we're never supposed to feel totally aligned with the audiences at these events. I feel like there's a lot of fun being poked at the people who aren't receptive as well. And I certainly do wish the movie was warmer toward George. And the movie could also be a little nicer to fat people in general.
Yes, fat people. And I have to say, Julia is such a great sport, but let's talk about some scenes here, because one of them, which is super cute, it's very nice. He's working the bar mitzvah. This is after he's been dumped by awful Linda. She's left him at the altar, and he can't handle, working weddings right now. So he's going to at least do bar mitzvahs at the sort of hall where they work. And, there's the boy who is a loner. He's feeling kind of like out of his league. And so Robbie, brings up Julia, but like the movie's, treats women a little badly as well. Cause then Julia's got to deal with this. First of all, earlier when we first meet her, an old guy slaps her butt and then is making kissing faces at her. And she's like, eh. And then she's now got to deal with this boy touching her butt as they're dancing. And yes, it's cute, but she's visibly shocked and uncomfortable, but she just puts up with it. And I'm just like, wow, you're a really good sport. You didn't have to do that, like little cringe, but I guess it's all showing that she has a good heart.
Oh, and the moment even of having her choose one of the boys, it's an odd moment, and all of the butt grabbing,
yes,
especially between children and adults.
Yes, because I'm glad you bring that up, Amos, because then even Robbie joins in on the fun, because I believe this is when George has the mic and is doing their solo. Then Robbie's dancing with a girl and puts the girl's hands on his butt, and I was like, wow, okay, I don't know about that. I don't know about that one. But yeah, lots of butt grabbing.
I think the spirit of the moment is to make things equitable. Like Julia is being felt up, so is Robbie. Now there are much, much better ways to make things equitable. And some would say they involve no intergenerational butt grabbing. I think that moment got away from them a little bit. Not one of the moments of the movie I would hold up as the best.
Yeah. Like I could picture back then in 98, the crowd laughing, but I could picture a few people being like, really? Whoa, okay.
Now the girl of his dreams is about to marry Mr. Wrong.
That's grade A, top choice meat.
And even the way, of course, Glenn talks about Julia, but we know he's a dick, but lots of either ass grabbing, ass watching, or talking about, grade A meat, top tier ass, like a lot of that kind of stuff throughout, which, like I said, at least with Glenn's case, we need to hear that to know, like, oh yeah, right off the bat, we know this guy is bad.
And that's another thing that I don't think is bad in this case, but it's not a sex positive movie, which I don't mean to say that like that's a bad thing about it. I think there's a real sweetness to how this movie is not about sex, but it is kind of funny how Glenn is this awful guy who is focused on sex, and he's cheating, and he's just this kind of superficial creep. And then when I'm drawing a blank on Christine Taylor's character's name.
I think her name is Holly. That's Julia's cousin, right? Yeah.
But when Holly tells Robbie when they double date, when she says, if you come inside with me, you're gonna get laid. And this is Marsha Brady from the Brady Bunch movie. This is quite an offer. And no thanks. I'm in love with the innocent.
Yes. Yeah. You bring up a great point there. Yeah. The people who are focused on sex are not, they make it very obvious that not that we don't agree with them, but they are they're up to no good on the sidelines. We're focused on the innocent, pure, very nice, gentle two people that's a good point. Because even Sammy,
or they're unhappy.
Or they're unhappy, absolutely. Because like as we learned with Sammy, his good friend, the limo driver, right? He later on at the bar is like, I just want someone to hold me and to tell me everything's going to be all right. And then that's when the old kind of bum does that for him. But yeah, you're right. They're also possibly unhappy, miserable in their lives. So yeah, the movie does show you that sex is not everything, when he's even like, yeah, because I think Sammy's the one in the very beginning who talks about Julia saying, oh yeah, I'm going to show her like you should never date people at work, that kind of thing. Like, I'm going to get that. So, and those are the people that are not having any luck with romance. So yeah, you're right. It's a very pure, family-friendly love story for the most part.
Uh-huh.
Unless he can pull off the performance of a lifetime.
She and Glenn just jumped a plane to Vegas. Go get her.
All right.
What are some other fun moments for you? Favorite moments, favorite lines, scenes, anything else that, like, when you think of The Wedding Singer, you think of these moments?
Okay, well, you brought up Sammy, and one of my favorite line readings of all time, and my brother and I have been saying this to each other ever since we saw it, when they're giving Sammy a limo driver tryout, and he's shoving the mannequins into the car, and they're timing him, and having a laugh together, because of course he's already going to be the limo driver for the wedding, but he's really stressing. And then he finishes, and they say, you did this, you hit the cones, and he says, they were cones. And the way he says they were cones is seared into my memory.
Oh, I love
forever.
That. Love it. Yeah, I almost wrote that down. I had a feeling we were going to talk about it, but yeah, because it's just, the line read is just perfect. He's so deflated, and yeah, they were cones. They're like, of course, later on, he says to Robbie, he says, so did I get the job? He's like, of course you got the job. He's like, so it's a week from today, August 5th. And I'm like, wait a minute. I know this is 1985, but you just now are booking your limo driver a week before the wedding? Come on now. I'm sure, Amos, you guys have 4 weeks to go for your wedding. I bet most of all of your things and people are all booked up, ready to go. They've known that date for a long time, but I know times have changed.
Most. The word most is doing a lot of work there.
Okay.
We have a couple of I's to dot and T's to cross.
You'll get there this week. This will be the big week. But yeah, I just thought that was funny, showing how, things were much more loose. I think they only have really 3 months to plan this thing. And it's now, time moves quickly in this movie that I forgot about, because we meet them and I'm pretty sure, they're talking about the Julia and Glenn's wedding date. It's a few weeks, a few months away. And then all of a sudden, it's the weekend, of the wedding. It's like, whoa, okay, things are moving fast. But I kind of like it. We keep it moving fast. The only thing is, I do feel like the ending, and maybe you agree, the ending does feel slightly rushed. Like, we go from them not being together, lots of great obstacles and lots of misunderstandings, to a very speedy resolution and a very speedy happy ending. And okay, it's done. I would love maybe a little bit more, but that's just me, maybe, being a glutton for the rom-com. I don't know.
But I also love the rushed ending so much.
Yeah.
And also it's delivering rom-com things. It's it happened one night, racing to break up a wedding because she shouldn't marry that rich guy.
Yeah.
And it's grand reconciliation and kiss in front of a surrogate audience. It's all of these things. It's the music swelling. It's him declaring his love with an original song, which is a thing that she had encouraged, and it has to do with not him getting it wrong and deciding he has to be a banker and a Wall Street guy in order to win her over, but in fact what he needs is a little more self-respect about what he actually is. And
yes, beautiful. I got a little teared up.
All of these rom-com goodies.
I got a little teared up on my latest rewatch. I don't know what's going on with me, but I don't know, when he came from beyond that first class curtain, which I love the whole first class bit, and of course Billy Idol. Oh my God, I remember having a lot of fun seeing that for the first time. But yeah, when he's coming out and singing that beautiful song, and also this movie reminds you that, at least back then, Adam Sandler had a pretty good singing voice, a very nice, softer singing voice that, really moves you. But she's got tears in her eyes, and it's like, oh my God, it's such a cute ending. I guess I just, because what's funny is, do you think, it's sort of unclear, but I assume I know this is correct. So they decide that day, like, he says, I'm in love with you. And she says, I am so in love with you. And Billy Idol's there, and they're like, can we kiss? They kiss. And then we just jump right to their wedding day, which, do you think, Amos, that was actually Julia and Glenn's wedding day? It's like the next day they just took over, because that's what I kind of get. And I'm like, wow. So Robbie and Julia have only been like dating, seeing each other, hanging out for like maybe a couple months. Whoa, fast. But whatever.
I don't believe that.
Okay.
I think they needed a little time to put their wedding together.
Yeah. Okay.
How else would they have Steve Buscemi there?
That's true. Yeah.
I think they need a little time to put things together.
Okay,
And
good. Yeah. Not so crazy. Because I'm like, wow, we are just going right for it. And her mom, because her mom is the one that says earlier in the iconic, one of my all-time favorite 90s movie scenes, rom-com scenes, when Drew perfectly says to the mirror, "Nice to meet you. I'm Julia Gulia." Oh my God. But her mom before that moment says, "You really want to leave Glenn, who, as they talk about, provides security, has money, is a good looking guy, status, all that. You really want to leave Glenn for the wedding singer?" Like everyone puts down this wedding singer, even though everyone knows he's good at his job and throws a great party. So I'm like, man. But yeah, I was wondering, I'm like, did she really just okay this in less than 24 hours? And because she's there celebrating with them in that last shot, as they walk back down the aisle. Okay, so I'm glad you're proving me wrong. Okay, yeah, it must have been a little later. Give it a little bit of breathing room. I think I just would have liked for there maybe to be, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe just give me a montage of like now showing them, doing all the stuff and him proposing, and just like a little montage to some cute 80s song, just to show me like, okay, 1 year later on this same day or whatever, they get married. But I guess I can't beg for too much. I got a good movie.
You're thinking of leaving Glenn for the wedding singer?
I love that plane whole bit. And it is funny. One benefit of rushing it is I remembered very well. I thought it was very funny. The scenes are so fast on the plane, and then we constantly are cutting to the plane flying in the air to like this very 80s transition music. That's fun and keeps it like super lively and stressful and all that bit. But I just love it's just so perfectly unrealistic, but so perfectly cute that like, oh my God, they're on the same plane. And I love that is not established until that moment. Like there's just some really good story things here that even if they're kind of silly, it's perfect. I'm glad because another filmmaker or another film the camera would have gone from Glenn and Julia, and then it would have shown us ahead of time and we would have known, oh my God, they're on the same plane. And that's a cool way to do it. But I do appreciate the way we found out when Robbie found out. Like I can picture the audience gasping like, oh, she's right there. They're on the same plane. Anyway,
yeah,
that's me nerding out over that.
Oh, and it's easy for me to even forget about that because I've seen it so many times. So
Right.
of course they're on the same plane. I
Yeah.
know it happens.
Yeah.
I even, I rewatch this movie and, the score of the movie is always previewing his song from the end, "I Want to Grow Old with You."
Yeah.
And you can only really know that on rewatch, but because I've seen this movie so many times, I smile every time it comes up because it's
Aw.
reminding me I know the happy ending this movie's going to have.
Yes, you know where we're going. How many times do you think you've seen this, Amos?
Oh God, it's got to be at least half a dozen.
Yeah.
But probably
more.
double digits.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. Hey, listeners and watchers, isn't it so nice having a candle lit at home when you're hanging out watching TV or reading or listening to a podcast? Use code REWIND, that's REWIND, to get 20% off your order when you go to nubblelightcandle.com. These high-quality 8-ounce soy candles are hand-poured in southern Maine and use essential oil blend fragrances. Some of them sparkle, too, when they're lit. And their new DIY candle-making kits are fun for you and your family or friends at home. Nubble Light Candle. For real, not fussy.
I don't know if you saw this, but there was a bit of trivia out there that the role of Glenn was originally written with Jim Carrey in mind.
I did see that. I'm glad you brought it up. I can't picture that at all.
Neither can I.
I like this actor as Glenn. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he is
Matthew Glave, I believe it is.
Matthew Glave. Yeah, okay. He's a perfect Glenn. Like he looks like that kind of he was you can tell he was like an athlete in school. He's he's just totally different from Sandler, who is, as lovingly more schlubby, and this guy's just this brawny, kind of like polo wearing guy. I think he's great. I can't imagine Jim Carrey in that role. It would have been very different, huh?
Yeah, and to me, there are a couple of weird things about the casting choices they didn't make, because apparently they considered all of these much more famous people. And I feel like it's great that they did not cast someone who we've rooted for as a lead in anything else. With Jim Carrey, we're maybe not in The Cable Guy, but we're used to rooting for him. Same with anyone else who's been a lead in a comedy of their own. But also, I think that, it makes it simpler. This guy's just bad. He's a creep. He objectifies women. He's actively mean to old people. Adam Sandler, teaching an old lady to sing on the barter
Rosie.
system.
Oh my God.
Glenn and his boys will punch an old man.
Yeah.
And beyond that, and so it makes it like an easier confection, this whole movie. Obviously, Julia shouldn't be with this guy. Robbie is creative. He's creative even in how he deals with people. He's creative in the sense that he's a songwriter. He's generous. And then you've got Glenn. And it's not just that he's a philandering Wall Street guy, which is a very easy kind of guy to root against. But what does he spend that money on? He spends that money on the most of the moment things possible. Dressing like he's in Miami Vice. A DeLorean, which, by the way, between his whole personality and the DeLorean, you can't imply cocaine much more without putting it in a movie.
Yeah, you're so right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like if you were to put someone like Jim Carrey in that role, it immediately makes him 100 times more creative.
Yeah,
because Jim Carrey, everything he does is going to be imbued with a little more pizzazz, a creativity. And Glenn has no pizzazz. All of his pizzazz is bought.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. I think Jim Carrey would have been distracting in many ways. And like you said, we would root for him, even if and I think he would be a fun villain, a villain where you could still only want to watch him. Whereas Glenn is just a villain, right? Like from the get-go, he and Linda, Robbie's ex, great casting, because I think her name's Angela Featherstone. I know she had done a good amount of stuff as well back then. Just great casting, because right off the bat, there's not, and maybe it goes back to Drew's, like you were saying, her whole angelic vibe. And these two don't have that, and you're just like, they're a little like shady. Yeah, he's a really good bad guy. And I love how later on the plane, he, much like Linda, I forgot about this. Robbie had told Julia, it's the little things that I should have taken seriously, but I just ignored. And Julia says, yeah, those little things matter. When they went to the Grand Canyon, Robbie and Linda, he talks about this trip, and he says, she had been there before and I hadn't, and she wouldn't let me sit in the window seat. And that's a bummer. And then here, the same thing is now happening with her on the plane going to Vegas, and she doesn't want to get married in Vegas. He just wants to party in Vegas, right? We know that. But he says, oh, well, I hate that seat. The bar cart always hits my elbow. I'm going to stay here. And how about this? I will let you lean over me to look out the window. It's like, oh my God, this guy. And I just feel so bad because she doesn't like him. Right in that moment, she's like, oh God, okay. And then she gets her elbow hit by the bar cart. So good casting with those villains, because I agree. I think anyone more famous or has led movies, big popular movies previously, it would complicate things. And you want the audience to know that these people are not good enough right off the bat.
On that note, let me ask you something. Have you ever had an Alabama Slammer?
No, I don't think I ever have.
Do you know what's in an Alabama Slammer?
I don't think I do. Tell me.
Because I didn't know what's in an Alabama Slammer. And, Glenn talks about, I think the night of his bachelor party talks about getting some Alabama Slammers. So I looked it up. And are you ready? Because this sounds...
Tell me.
Okay, it's got sloe gin, amaretto, orange juice,
Oh.
and Southern Comfort.
Oh, that sounds like literally my stomach just like moved a bit. That sounds like a
Right?
couple things competing there.
I
Yeah.
can't picture drinking that without vomiting. I
Amaretto
cannot.
and orange juice. You had me at those two. Yeah, it's a no. It's a no from me. Huh, yuck. I would say no to that. Oh, and another thing I just thought of, you talking about the alcohol. Both Robbie and Julia don't really drink. They both pass on, although she does drink, but she gets really sick at the club when they're on their double date. But they both kind of say, even from the get-go, like, oh no, I'm good. So that's another thing. This movie really is showing us you gotta not care about sex or alcohol, and you're gonna live a happy life with your significant other.
He's more than a lover.
What do you think of the jacket? I don't know, man. I would lose that glove. You look nuts.
He's more than a legend.
Two moments rewatching that really made me laugh out loud. Going back to Rosie, the sweet older lady played by Ellen Albertini Dow, I believe her name is. I mean, iconic with her grandma rap, right? Everyone knows that. But it made me laugh out loud this time because it had been a while since I rewatched. I forgot she pays him in meatballs, and that it's always two. Because then later on she says, "I'll give you a raise, 3 meatballs," but that she refuses to let him go without his payment. So she says, hold out your hands, and gives him 1 massive meatball in each hand. And then what made me laugh, I had forgotten this part, she just loves him so much. She's so happy to have him in her life that she makes him take a bite out of one. And then she puts her hands in his and squeezes them. And it's just like, oh my God, so gross, so silly. I don't know why. That really made me laugh. And then the other moment that I'm watching it by myself, laughing out loud like a crazy person, is when it's during the Hall & Oates montage, lots of wedding planning for Julia's wedding. And she's there with Holly and her mom and Robbie and Sammy, and they're tasting little bits of cake. You remember that? They're going down the line, feeding each other cake. And then Robbie at the end of the line turns around and there's this stranger, I'm sorry, this is mean, but this horrifying woman with yellow teeth. I mean, what an actress. And she's just there opening up, like waiting for him to feed her cake, do you know? And oh my God, that just made me laugh. And she is just so gross. And they're all like, ugh. It's so random, but it just brought me so much joy. So I just have to shout out those two little silly moments for sure.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I think one of my big takeaways from this movie is that the way it's peppered with small characters is
Yep.
probably the best of the Sandler movies, because, after this might be a little harsh, but I feel like Sandler movies go downhill after this because Rob Schneider starts appearing in them.
Oh, that's so
And
interesting. I forgot the Schneider of it all. Yeah, I guess he wasn't. You're right. He's not in this or his earlier ones. That's really interesting.
nope. The
Yeah.
first one is The Water Boy later this year, or later
Wow.
that same year.
Yeah.
And from then on, it's like 50 First Dates, there's a good movie in there, but there's so much crap stapled to it.
Yeah.
Like, it is a sweet movie with 2 good leads, but then that Sean Astin character makes the movie grind to a halt. Rob Schneider is just cringeworthy in that movie. And so I think if you put me in an editing room with 50 First Dates, I could give you a very, very good hour-long movie.
Yeah.
The Schneider of it all.
I agree with you. I know a lot of people love 50 First Dates, but out of their 3 films with this duo, Wedding Singer all the way. And I think you're right. This movie, you have your John Lovitz, like you said, Steve Buscemi is in it. There's even probably other cameos that I'm blanking on right now, but they do such funny, silly little simple stuff, but it's never taking away from our main focus. It's never changing the film. Maybe it's Carrie Fisher's magic touch, Judd Apatow, I don't know, those ghostwriters, right? But yeah, that's interesting. I agree. His movies, I'm sure I liked a few posts. I actually really liked Just Go With It with him and Jennifer Aniston. I thought that one was actually surprisingly pretty good and pretty fun. But yeah, a lot of them same old and gross and just sort of like men shouting jokes at each other kind of thing. So
yeah, or just kind of taking weird detours for shtick. And I think part of the advantage of having this kind of 80s mockery throughout the movie is that it allows them to just kind of ambiently pepper in jokes and pepper in shtick and pepper in, goofy ideas without kind of pulling the car over.
You're so right, because I think it's his brother-in-law, Robbie's brother-in-law, talks about, and then Rosie, the sweet old lady, talks about this as well later on. The brother-in-law says, like, yeah, your sister and I, many times we just go to bed, but sometimes, like, she plays with my nipples. And then later Rosie says, yeah, all the nipple twisting that goes on there. If it was Rob Schneider or some of these other guys, David Spade, whatever, that were in more Adam Sandler stuff, that whole nipple twisting thing would be a whole, like, B plot, and it would not have been as odd and funny as it is here, because it works with just 2 jokes. They would have beat that to death, and you're like, okay, yeah, the nipple stuff got really weird,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in this case, like, God, I wish we had gotten more Sandler movies like this, because I love some of Sandler's serious work. I love Uncut Gems. I love Punch Drunk Love. I think, one of the biggest defenders of funny people. But at the same time, The Wedding Singer is far and away the best movie where it's an Adam Sandler movie. It's Adam Sandler's comedy. It's focused on Adam Sandler doing Adam Sandler things, but it also has a structure. It also has a real female lead. It has some of his friends there, but it's not overstuffed with them.
Yeah.
And you know what? Even someone like Alan Covert, who barely does any movies ever that don't involve Sandler. But he's good in this.
Yes.
And his character is good and really serves a purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah, he really has some good stuff going on. Some of those crass jokes, but then, I mean, he even gives Robbie his credit card to pay for that last seat on the plane. There's some real good friend stuff going on there as well. Yeah, I agree. It's more than just his typical kind of like, I'm just Sandler's sidekick, acting a fool.
You are the worst wedding singer in the world, buddy.
Well, I have a microphone and you don't.
So you will listen to every damn word I have to say!
And now I'm going to throw it over to 2 friends I've known for a very long time, Jackie and Allison, who are both big fans of The Wedding Singer.
Hey everybody, this is Jackie Rennie, and I'm here to talk about how much I love The Wedding Singer. So this is the only movie in my life where upon first viewing, I immediately rewound the tape and then popped it right back in the VCR. And yes, I know that dates me, but it was just so goofy and sweet. And by the time you get to Billy Idol and the song on the plane and Steve Buscemi singing True at their wedding, there was just this giddy sense of euphoria that I immediately needed to recapture. And while the jokes and sight gags are hilarious, I think it really stands apart from the usual Adam Sandler fare because you actually spend time and get to know both Robbie and Julia separately as individuals. It's a love story you can root for, and I know Drew fought to give Julia more depth in that capacity. So shout out to my favorite costume designer, Mona May, for the colorful fashion in this film. I credit Julia for my closet full of diner dresses and denim jackets. And the 2-volume soundtrack also completely informed my current musical taste. I'm forever grateful that I was introduced to awesome bands like New Order and The Smiths at a young age. I am such a big fan. I even put musical Wedding Singer Easter eggs into my own wedding. Rom-coms aren't my typical fare, but this is a feel-good movie I will drop everything for and watch every time it's on TV. Easily in my top 10.
Well, I have a microphone and you don't, so you will listen to every damn word I have to say, or at least for the next minute or so. Of course, has to be my opening line to discuss one of my favorite movies, The Wedding Singer. The entire soundtrack, the fashion, the mesh of the cast, with Drew Barrymore, Adam Sandler, John Lovitz. I loved him in The Credit growing up. Of course, who doesn't love Grandma with her rendition of Rapper's Delight in there, just to name a few things. The movie just has a realness about it that takes away the cringe of that rom-com genre for me. The entirety of Somebody Kill Me, that song with its ups and downs, chef's kiss. Then, of course, for real life application, I was with some of our classmates and I was one of the mutants over at table 9. And of course, I have to end with, I don't know what I said, but I said something.
Actually, one trivia bit I heard for this that I love is that apparently Drew Barrymore didn't hear any of the songs, any of Adam Sandler's original songs before the scenes. So that includes, so that her reactions would be more genuine and more spontaneous. So that, of course, you talk about how you got a little teary at the end. And I think some of that is that you can see Drew Barrymore's face.
Yeah.
You know, she's styled so innocently in this, but she's having this reaction that does feel unusually spontaneous, and
Yeah.
it's so sweet. But also when he sings his song that he wrote half when he was happy with Linda and half when he was heartbroken.
Iconic, yes.
Which, by the way, that song really upset my dog. His ears turned sideways and he looked up in alarm until the song was over.
Oh yeah, it's abrasive, I would say. Yeah, but it's iconic. Yeah, but even that, I guess she hadn't heard that song either until he sang it. Yeah, and it's funny you bring that scene up too, because not only is that song just also so perfect, and then somebody kill me please, but the way she's watching him. I actually think that's some of Drew Barrymore's not only most subtle acting in the film, but kind of just most subtle of all of her films. She's not pouting. She's not like cringing. She's kind of just watching him, and you can feel like an internal, like, oh, this poor guy. But she still is trying to support him. It's like that. You can just see her face. There isn't a lot going on in a good way in that scene. And for Drew Barrymore, where some of her haters think she's always kind of like, overdoing it. That is a very nice, simple performance in that scene, listening to him sing through his pain,
Absolutely.
And that leads to John Lovitz in such a funny moment that also made me write it down, where he had just heard that breakdown of a song. And what does he say? I have to say it word for word.
He's losing his mind, and I'm reaping all the benefits.
And then he just closes the curtain like, oh yeah, what a great cameo. Great cameo from John Lovitz. So fun. Such another dick, being mean to Robbie about his whole breakup. Yeah, it's a really cute movie. It'll make you smile. It's a great rewatch. And I'm so glad you said, yeah, it's a great send up of the 80s where it doesn't become overkill. We have one of the kids in the Freddy Krueger mask, which had just in the 80s, in 85, the sequel for Nightmare on Elm Street 2, that had just come out in 85. So like there's little touches, the Rubik's Cube, Holly's like, no one's ever going to figure that out, but it's all just enough to make us laugh or make us point, but it's never too much where we're like, okay, yeah, we got it. It's all done in moderation, which feels nice.
It's also weird to live in the future where they'll do things like introduce the notion of a CD player to some of these characters. And now, I've got nephews to whom I've recommended Sandler movies, and they've seen Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
I don't think they've seen The Wedding Singer, but the idea of a CD player would be as odd to them as it is to Julia in The Wedding Singer.
Yeah.
And that's
so right.
Horrifying to me.
Oh my God, that's horrifying. We used to bring those things everywhere. I mean, you remember holding the CD player, had your not even like earbuds. We had the whole headset. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's funny. I think he says, I just got a CD player. It cost me $700. Wow. Crazy. Yeah, that's really funny now that this movie is even more of a time capsule for sure. It's a special one. Well, it ended up, and like I said, all of their films, Drew and Adam's films, have been successful. But this ranks as their number 2 most successful film with the two of them. It made $123 million worldwide. Never made it to number 1 because of that damn Titanic, but it at least stayed steady, at 2 or 3 for a while in the theaters. And
what a romantic time.
Right? Oh my gosh. What you had lovers everywhere. Maybe not in Sphere, but you had, you had Titanic, you had Wedding Singer, Good Will Hunting, As Good as It Gets, Great Expectations, I guess. Sure, you had lots of love in February 98.
The Wedding Singer.
I said hip hop, I hip it to the hip hip hop. You don't stop the rock to the bang bang boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie the beat.
It's pretty cool, actually. That's why I'm so happy you were a guest on this episode, because you have made films that have rom-com elements and stories in it. So yeah, it's cool to talk to you about a film that helped you realize like, oh, I really do like that kind of story. That's pretty cool. I think that's pretty special.
And hey, I'm working on trying to get even deeper into rom-coms.
Love it.
That's the goal, because you know what? To me, I have no higher aspiration than to make the sort of movie that I would want to watch on TBS on a 90s weekend afternoon.
I applaud that. And that's how the wedding singer and the wedding waitress lived happily ever after. And Amos is about to get his happily ever after in a few weeks. When we stopped recording, he told me that, funny enough, he's actually having a DJ instead of a wedding singer and band at his big event. Thank you, Amos Posner. Had a great time chatting with you, and thank you out there for listening to us. You can rent Amos's feature films B-Side and After Party on various digital apps, and After Party is currently streaming on Amazon Prime and Paramount Plus as well, so check that out. Thank you also to Jackie Rennie and Allison Cook for sending in your thoughts. That was so fun. And if you're a visual person or you have a friend who is, this episode is now on YouTube. And video highlights of our conversation will also be on Portland Media Center's website and YouTube page. Thanks, PMC. Find me on Instagram at Release Date Rewind to see bonus content and more trivia about this movie. Thank you, Greg Clements, for the logo and Kyle Motzinger for the theme song. Tell your friends about the show, and next time, we're talking about a very different kind of romance in the 90s neo-noir film, Wild Things. Ooh, bye-bye.